terms of the solar system passing through these magnetic bands. And so we may have a die-off in the sense of attrition even, wherein fragility rises to such a level that it becomes a real problem for the species. But at the same time, it does appear that there will be a new technology relating to new ways of looking at electricity, magnetism, and so on. And that may propel us into, George Jetson future kind of stuff. I just don't know.
I was married to an Austrian who was a pretty high-level Austrian, and while I was over there, I discovered that Austrian was digging underground shelters to house every Austrian for up to 5 years, so that there would be food and water for up to 5 years.
Sure, in the 60s I visited such tunnels in Switzerland. Yeah.
Pardon that?
In the 1960s, due to a particular set of circumstances, I was given access to the military tunnels that are in all the giant, in the Alps, just riddling them, huge areas that people could live in for years and years and years.
Yes, that is definitely true. Not only do they have those in preparation, but they've got huge scientific laboratories in those Alps. And, underground, going down 40 floors or more. Also, their library with things going all the way back to, the Library of Alexandria they have in bunker-hardened underground libraries that they say the only thing that would ever destroy them is if the planet fell apart. And even then, the library would go, swirling out in space.
Which brings us back to the 1950s. Isaac Asimov in a series of shows called Tom Corbett's Space Cadet, when that happened, and they sent Tom Corbett and his crew to an asteroid that was whizzing around space because they discovered a tetrahedral doorway on the top of it and something buried inside it. And he went to rescue all the information that was in there.
Well, extraordinary, because if the Earth ever shattered, the Austrians have built something that will go off into space.
Right, but curiously, of course, I don't know if anybody's ever brought this to anybody's attention, and it would seem that they must know this, the powers that be must know this, that if humans go underground after 37 days, menstruation stops and fertility ceases.
No, I didn't know that, but I'm sure they must know that.
Right.
But the other thing, while they were showing me or telling me about their preparations, they also showed me the map of New Vienna, which is going to be built on that little island in between the Danube and the Danube Canal where OPEC is.
Oh, sure, okay.
And that it had crystal cities that just literally seemed like they went up to space, and they had what they called a space elevator. And just about 3 months ago, I saw that NASA has finally developed the fabric to build the space elevator. And so while the Austrians are preparing for some sort of destruction where their people will all survive, they are also preparing for this future that appears to open up to the ETs or to the universe or something.
Right. There's some real issues there with the idea of a space elevator, as was demonstrated with the tether experiments on the space shuttle. Their magnetic fields of the Earth are not rotating at the same rate as the surface of the Earth, and therefore any filament that extended from the surface of the Earth through to outer space in a space elevator fashion, no matter what it is made of, the fact that it's grounded, it's going to be a huge conduit for gigantic levels of voltage, and it would be self-destroyed.
Wow, that's interesting.
Just like, you can't build buildings beyond a certain height because the weight of the building crushes the foundation under it. We live within certain oscillating issues with gravity, and how gravity is merely a helical form of opposing electrical and magnetic frequencies. And we get to the stage where there are certain physical laws that we can't overcome. So, for instance, it may be feasible that humans could live in Mars, for instance, or on the Moon. And the Jain tradition goes back some 600 million years and calls the solar system that we're in, or describes it as being enclosing 2.5 islands of life within the planetary structure, specifically Mars, Earth, and the Moon, and said that 600 million years ago we had a civilization on all of them. Then the issue for us is that because we're tied to the sun in so many different levels, our pineal glands, our endocrine systems, everything, it would seem unlikely that we could ever have a situation where we could exist outside of these particular islands. So long-term space existence is not good for humans. And I would suspect that we probably couldn't exist in another solar system, simply because the sun wouldn't be at the same frequency, we wouldn't have the same radiational levels, and our whole endocrine system would go bluey.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure that I've got 1,000,001 other questions, but I've got other questions that are more important that I want to get to.
Sure.
You said that John F. Kennedy was our last president that had access to the many levels of intel, above top secret.
That's my understanding, and I've been told by some people that are in a position to know.
And you also say that Obama has 27 levels of security above him.
That's as I've been told, correct.
In other words, his clearance probably isn't as high as mine used to be when I was married to the Dean of Science and Engineering at the Naval Postgraduate School.
That may well be the case, yeah.
And to even sleep in his bed, I had to be cleared above top secret to SI. Anyway, who are these people that are in these 27 levels of security above our president?
I know only a couple of individuals that are maybe 1 or 2 layers higher than that. I don't know anybody beyond them. So certainly the guys that I'm discussing things with are no more than 5 layers up, and of course they're very circumspect. The reason I happen to know a couple of them is the fact that I'm old, and I met these guys a long time ago before they reached these elevated positions. So it's a matter of mutual trust and the fact that we know each other from way back when. So they are mostly not aware of who is beyond their boss. So it's very much like a cell system. You know who's your handler, and you know who you handle, but beyond that, you can't read either direction.
Right. Very, very compartmentalized is what you're saying.
Correct.
More than compartmentalized. Probably we should start calling them blocks rather than compartments because...
Well, I like the allusion to the cell because the cell is very accurate in many other ways because the cell is isolated. It can be removed or extracted without really destroying the other cells except for where they happen to touch, etc. So it's more like a neural network than anything. And you remove one set of neural network componentry, and the rest of it goes along and can eventually repair itself. And
who or what do you think is at the top of this?
Well, there's a lot of supposition that it's not a human, that it goes to some level of aggregated consciousness or some level of consciousness that it might even go all the way back to what was exhibited by or described by John Dee as macrobes. And John Dee is this fellow from the 1500s. He was a magician and a sorcerer of note. He was the first person to take the designation of 007. He was one of the Queen's agents at the time. He was a pre-Illuminati bloodline supporter, and he was an agent, as I say, of the Queen in the British Empire. And he's also an agent of the forces that are deeper than that. And
oh, my gosh. We're talking Rothschild Illuminati here, aren't we?
What's that?
I said we're talking Rothschild Illuminati.
Even before that, the precursors.
The precursors to those, right.
Right.
What year was this?
I'm sorry?
What year was this?
I think 1540, something like that.
Okay.
I mean, it's John Dee. You can look him up. His major work that is really cool is called The Hieroglyphic Monad, which by John Dee and Hamilton Jones, and it actually relates to crop circles.
Wow. We will be right back. I want to know more about the Hieroglyphic Monad, and I want to get into crop circles. We're talking with Clif High from Half Past Human. Don't go away. We're just getting into the best of it here on Rumor Mill News Radio on the Micro Effects Broadcast Network. You're listening to Rumor Mill News Radio. I am talking with Clif High from Half Past Human, and he was just talking about John Dee and a hieroglyphic monad, which you, Clif, think John Dee was talking about crop circles. Is that what you said?
I'm saying it's related in the sense that John Dee wrote a book that he actually entitled The Monad, Hieroglyphically, Mathematically, Magically, and Kabbalistically Explained. He wrote it in 1564 over the course of 13 days. And it describes the situation of what we can think of as like high magic, in which the forces of nature are manipulated in order to discuss and contact what he called the macrobes. Now, and we think of it this way, John Dee explained it this way. Just as we cannot, with our naked eye, see microbes because they're too small, there are macrobes that are at too high a frequency, but are nonetheless a life form, and we cannot see them with the naked eye or know them. And so what he developed was, if we want to think about it, a sort of a strange technology that might actually fall into the category of remote viewing with rigorous protocols that allowed him to contact these macrobes. And curiously, of course, Hitler resurrected this hieroglyphic monad technique for the Vril and other societies that led to the creation of the Bell and all of their weird stuff with the channeled technology that they were theoretically getting. And so,
speaking of the Bell, do you have any idea what it was?
Sure. Oh, yeah. It's a two-story high power system that was intended to be put into a Vaimani.
What's a Vaimani?
That's a Vedic description of a spaceship. Usually 5 stories high, 2 stories were devoted to the power system, 3 stories to human habitation and armament. And it's well described in the Vedic text of the Brahma-Yama's discussion. Let me see, there's Rama-Yama, there's like 4 of the texts in which the Vaimani appear, and it describes the battles between humans and their extraterrestrial humans and some other nasty, not-so-nice humanoids.
Extraordinary. Are you familiar with Ed Grimsley?
I'm terrible about this. I'm very dyslexic, so I rarely remember authors and stuff, although I'll remember a great deal about what I read.
Well,
No.
He's the fellow that has these super night vision binoculars, and he's been telling people that there are massive fleets of aliens in space who are in battle with each other.
Oh, okay, sure. And I actually know of many historical references. Hannibal crossing the Alps watches a giant space battle going on that he said was, he took to be an omen that he would win in conquering Rome. And it was just coincidental that it was going on at the same time.
Well,
and so there's a lot of those, yeah.
Do you believe the Germans actually created this and their ships are out there now?
I don't like believing anything. The word belief means I wish, as in I wish it to be true. I've heard a lot of evidence. I don't have any direct evidence that would support it, but there's some really strange stuff out there. So, again, though, there's issues with, in my viewpoint, in the way I understand and experience reality, there's real issues with humans in space. And I don't know how we can overcome them. For instance, NASA, for all of its efforts, cannot grow plants in space. It cannot produce a plant-based diet. So we're restricted to what we can carry with us. And it causes all kinds of problems. Without the issue of replicators and the ability to create artificial gravities down to the hairs on the gnat's butt, we're seriously restricted and humans can't go anywhere. So we're planet-bound. Whatever happens to Earth happens to us, and the idea of fleeing Earth for safety just does not exist.
So all of the elite who are building their spaceships to leave planet, unless they're reptiles and aliens, they can't do it. Is that what you're saying?
That's my understanding. That's my experience of reality, yes. That we're vibrational entities. The idea of an atom as a little tiny rock whizzing around in space is merely a mental construct that allows us to do some accurate measurement on some other things at a grosser level. But the way I look at universe is a series of vibrations that start off at a 22 trillion per second cycle and gradually resolve down to a 1 second cycle where we can actually, in our grosser experience, grosser consciousness, experience this. So, for instance, many physiologists will tell you the human brain is subjected to about 2 billion inputs per second.